That's what it was. It was easy. To go high. It's not easy.
3, 2, 1. Hello, I greet you all in the spirit of debate. My name is Soma Kawala, the first speaker of Senate Opposition Government in today's debate, right? Now, what will I be doing for you within today's debate? Right? Now, my jurisdiction as the first speaker. First of all, I have to take on the points brought up by third professor within today's debate. And then I also have to characterize the nature of one, the national educational curriculum, and two, what maritime education is, right? And then again, I tell you that I'm going to further establish the bone of contention within today's debate. Followed by my second speaker, who will further elaborate and establish as to why we reign victorious within today's debate, and also take on the points brought forth by said proposition within today's debate, right? And then followed by my third speaker, who will refute and rebuttal on the points brought forth by team proposition, and overall give you an overall summary of what was said within today's debate and give you the best of both worlds, right? Now, sometimes one thing we have to establish, it becomes quite problematic when you do not understand what you're actually advocating for and what you actually want to incorporate, right? Because according to World Maritime University, for you to have an effective maritime educational curriculum, you need to have two aspects, right? The theory and the practical. Now, our team proposition fails to understand this. The moment you tell us that you're going to incorporate just the theory, it becomes quite problematic because, again, why are you advocating to incorporate an incomplete framework, right? Now they also have to come up and prove to us how they're going to cater for the practical aspects of it, and the moment they do not that, it becomes quite problematic on their side of us, right? And we have to establish that the national educational curriculum means what? It's a set standard of objectives that students have to do. This is why I tell you, if you have a mathematics syllabus, right, there's an objective in that mathematics syllabus. For example, the learner has to know the quadratic formula, right? Now what we're saying is, now for you to actually, they said they're going to implement it as a promotional subject, right? Now one thing we find problematic, the moment you tell us you're going to implement it as a promotional subject, right, you have to establish that the standards set for it have to either increase or decrease. And when you have a specialized subject such as maritime education, the standards have to increase. And when the standards for those learners have to increase, meaning the requirements for them also increase, meaning what? The standards, if the learner is already struggling to meet basic competencies, now they also have to deal with the problem of meeting those increased standards, right? And then those things come up here telling us that we have to, the burden they give us, we have to promote, answer Article 20 of the Constitution. Yet again, they fail to understand that Article 20 of the Constitution advocates for basic education, right? The moment you tell us that you're going to incorporate a specialized subject such as maritime education, we find it quite problematic on the side of ourselves. Now, one thing we have to establish, what we find problematic, according to the Namibian Surveying Authority and NAMFI Fisheries and Maritime Sector Skills, right? What they find problematic when teaching people about the maritime sector or training them, right, is not the fact that they are not aware of the maritime sector, but it's the fact that they lack basic foundational knowledge, right, such as basic literacy and numeracy. So I'm just saying is, first fix the educational framework so that people can actually have basic universal knowledge, right? So what do we mean by this? For example, if you were to incorporate quantum physics into the educational curriculum, you would first need to provide a foundational knowledge in math and physics, right? So first you have to establish that people need that basic foundational knowledge, and then we tell you that we can talk about incorporating. And that's why we tell you that it's not necessary to incorporate it, because again, you limit the debate to basic education, right? And the whole purpose of basic education is to provide basic fundamental knowledge. Now, that is what we're saying within today's debate. Now, what is within current secondary school? Within current secondary school, we tell you that according to the Ministry of Education, only out of 40,000 learners that wrote grade 11 last year, only 12,000 actually qualified for AS. What does this mean? It shows you that the current Namibian learner is struggling to meet basic competencies. They are struggling to meet the current standards. Now, when you tell us that you're going to incorporate maritime education into it, you have to take into accountability. If you have a population, if you're a learner that can barely calculate the formula for quadratic equation, how do you necessarily want to incorporate a specialized subject such as what? Such as high skills navigation into the curriculum, right? And then we bring you the principle of practical necessity, whereby we tell you the idea that the purpose of
Man, this is why we tell you we're incorporating it as an elective professional subject for those who are able to keep up with basic competencies.
So now, once again, we have to understand that the whole point of you trying to incorporate it is to spread maritime awareness. For you to tell us you're going to implement it only for those who can meet competencies is you are being selective, meaning what? You are not being inclusive. And again, the whole purpose of education is to be inclusive, right? It has to cater for everyone, not just a specific people who cater. So if we're able to say that now they're only getting for students who can achieve A's in biology, then doesn't that go against the whole purpose of why you're incorporating it, right? And then again we tell you that. According to the Namibian Labour Survey of 2018, right, the main problem again that sectors have when it comes to training workforce is not necessarily that they are not aware of what is going on with the sectors, it's the fact that they fail to meet basic competencies. They don't have that universal foundational knowledge that they actually need to go into the sectors. Again, we ask you, what is the point of incorporating maritime education, right? And then you have, but then the learners fail to actually meet the entry skill levels needed to go in that sector. When we tell you that now we have a learner who knows what the maritime sector is about, but doesn't meet the qualification to actually go into the maritime sector. Now this is why we ask you that now I will no longer be taking pure eyes. This is why I ask you that what type of proposition necessarily catering for and advocating for. Does it cater for only a specific sector, or now does it cater for society at large? Because we have to establish that what we consider the fact the maritime sector is important, right? But you have to establish that Namibia is more than just its maritime sector. If we use the same philosophy now, allow me to flip it around. If the maritime sector is important, so is the mining sector. Why don't we incorporate mining education into the national curriculum as well? That is the philosophy they are coming up with, and that is what I find problematic on their side. Now, again, we tell you that the basic, our argument within today's debate is that basic education is still a challenge. Now, the current educational curriculum is what is facing challenges and is currently ineffective. Again, we tell you, according to the Ministry of Education, Namibia currently caters for 896,000 learners, right? And then, if you compare that to the teacher ratio, we only have 33,000 qualified teachers, right? Now, that's already problematic because now we have to cater for almost 1 million learners with only 33,000 trained staff, right? And then again, we tell you, when you want to incorporate maritime education, those standards have to meet global standards, right? It has to be certified by the IMO, meaning basic teachers won't work anymore. So either you have to take the current teachers and make sure they have the qualifications in order to actually come teach them, or you have to take a new group of people to go get those qualifications in order to come teach them. And that overall is already ineffective, right? So again, we tell you that we are not against the maritime sector growing. However, we're against the notion that incorporating maritime education into the educational framework, into the national educational curriculum is actually effective. Because at the end of the day, we have to prove that it's not necessary. And what we're currently telling you is it's not necessary. Because even if you incorporate it, for as long as your kids don't know how to say big fat cat, or they don't know how to read and write, it will not be ineffective because they don't have the entry skills needed to go into that sector, right? Now, again, we tell you that there are other ways to spread awareness, such as programs and campaigns. Now look at this, at NAPOD, right? We have to understand that NAPOD runs career campaigns. There are so many other ways to necessarily cater for maritime awareness, right? Because I think that you have to understand maritime awareness does not equal maritime literacy. No matter what you want to incorporate into the education framework, doesn't mean that the person will actually now go into that sector, right? And then again, we tell you that our side advocates for what? We advocate for what? We want programs and career fairs in order to spread awareness. Two, we tell you that we want our educational framework to be fixed because the whole purpose of basic education is to provide basic education, right? Not specialized subjects such as maritime education. And three, we want to tell you that yes, we have a problem with tertiary institutes because NAMFI has a certificate that can rest. It's not accepted internationally. So what we have to do is we first have to fix our tertiary institutes, because at the end of the day, when you go apply for the maritime sector, they don't want your grade 12 certificate. They want that degree, they want that master's, they want that diploma, right? That is what we're advocating for within today's debate. So again, we tell you that we're not against maritime education. However, we're against necessarily incorporating it because inherently it doesn't lead to an increase in the maritime sector. It just leads to a whole problematic case within today's debate, right? And that is why I'm proud to oppose. I thank you very much.